The gilded ballroom of the Ashworth estate sparkled like a constellation brought to earth. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, and champagne flowed as freely as the memories being shared among old friends. At the center of it all stood Marcus Ashworth, the groom-to-be, his smile as brilliant as the diamond cufflinks winking at his wrists. Before we begin, kindly hit the subscribe button for more true crime stories. To the man who finally got caught, shouted Daniel Chen, raising his glass toward the vaulted ceiling. His designer suit fit perfectly over his athletic frame, and his boyish grin hadn't changed since their university days at Yale. Beside him, Elena Vasquez laughed, the sound melodic and warm. Her scarlet dress hugged her curves, and her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder like a waterfall of silk. Caught. More like he finally decided to stop running from commitment. Marcus embraced them both, his cologne expensive and overwhelming. It only took me until 35 to find someone worth settling down for. Victoria is perfect. The three friends had been inseparable once. Growing up in the same Connecticut neighborhood, they'd shared everything: treehouse secrets, first kisses, college applications. But life, as it tends to do, had scattered them across different continents and careers. Daniel had become a hotshot corporate lawyer in Singapore. Elena ran a successful art gallery in Barcelona. And Marcus had inherited his family's pharmaceutical empire and never really had to work for anything. Speaking of Victoria, where is the blushing bride? Elena asked, scanning the crowd. Spa day with her bridesmaids, Marcus said, checking his Rolex. She's very particular about her pre-wedding routine. Leaves me free for one last hurrah with my best friends. Daniel's eyes gleamed mischievously. The bachelor party. I've got something special planned for tonight, old friend. Something that'll remind you of the good old days. A shadow passed across Marcus's face, so quickly that Elena almost missed it. No pranks, Danny. We're not kids anymore. Of course not, Daniel said smoothly, but Elena caught the slight edge in his voice. Just good, clean fun, like always. The rehearsal dinner continued with toasts and laughter, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way Daniel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The way Marcus's hand trembled slightly when he reached for his wine glass. The way both men seemed to be performing rather than genuinely celebrating. As waiters cleared the dessert plates, Marcus pulled them both aside. Listen, there's something I need to tell you both. Before the wedding, before everything becomes official. Save it for the bachelor party, Daniel interrupted, clapping him on the shoulder perhaps a bit too hard. We've got all night to reminisce and share deep, dark secrets. Marcus's jaw tightened. Right. All night. Elena watched them with growing unease. She knew these men, or she thought she had. But 15 years could change people in ways that couldn't be measured in laugh lines and gray hairs. It could hollow them out, fill them with resentments that festered in the dark. The party dispersed around midnight, guests retiring to their luxurious rooms scattered across the estate. Daniel had rented the entire property for the wedding weekend. Marcus's treat, naturally. Everything Marcus touched turned golden, or so it seemed. Bachelor party kicks off at 2 a.m. in the billiard room, Daniel announced as they parted in the hallway. Old school, like when we used to sneak out of our parents' houses. Elena retired to her room, but found sleep impossible. Through her window she could see the billiard room's lights flickering on at precisely 2 o'clock. She watched Daniel and Marcus enter, their shadows playing against the curtains like a puppet show foretelling tragedy. At 2:47 a.m., she heard the scream. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived at the Ashworth estate as dawn painted the sky the color of old bruises. She'd been roused from bed by a frantic call from local police, a death at a high society wedding, potential homicide, VIPs involved. The kind of case that could make or break a career. The billiard room had been cordoned off with yellow tape that looked almost festive against the mahogany paneling. Inside, Marcus Ashworth lay sprawled across the green felt of the pool table, his white shirt blooming with crimson. A cue stick lay beside him, its brass tip stained dark. Time of death estimated between 2:30 and 3 a.m., said Officer Jenkins, consulting his notes. Blunt force trauma to the head, but also signs of poisoning. Medical examiner says there are unusual toxins in his system. Morrison circled the body, her trained eyes cataloging every detail. 3 crystal tumblers sat on the mahogany bar, each containing varying levels of amber liquid. A deck of cards was scattered across the Persian rug, as if someone had been in the middle of dealing when chaos erupted. Who found him? She asked. Elena Vasquez. She says she heard a scream and came running, found him like this. Morrison turned to see Elena sitting in the hallway, wrapped in a silk robe, her face ashen. Beside her sat Daniel Chen, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or laughter. It was hard to tell. "Miss Vasquez, Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you both, separately." Elena went first, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. "I couldn't sleep. I was watching from my window. I know how that sounds, but I was worried. Marcus and Daniel, they had this tension between them all evening. At 2:47, I heard someone scream. By the time I got downstairs, the door was locked. I had to get a staff member to help me break it down. That's when we found him." "Was the door locked from the inside or outside?" "Inside," Elena said. "The key was in the lock, turned from the inside." A locked room mystery. Morrison's pulse quickened. "And Mr. Chen?" "He was already there when I arrived, standing over the body, holding the cue stick." Daniel's story was different. "I left the room at 2:30 to take a phone call, a client in Singapore, different time zone. When I came back 15 minutes later, the door was locked. I heard sounds inside, glass breaking, someone choking. I started pounding on the door, screaming for Marcus. Then Elena showed up with the key." "But Ms. Vasquez says you were inside when she entered." Daniel's eyes were red-rimmed, wild. I don't remember. Maybe I got in through the window? There's a balcony." "The window was locked from the inside too, Mr. Chen, and there's no balcony on that side of the estate." Morrison stepped back into the billiard room, studying the scene with fresh eyes. Something about this was staged, theatrical. The body's position, the dramatic weapon, the locked room, it all screamed of someone who wanted to make a statement. She examined the tumblers more closely. One had lipstick traces on the rim, Elena's shade. One smelled strongly of whiskey with an underlying chemical scent. The third was nearly empty but showed no prints at all, as if it had been wiped clean. On the pool table, partially hidden under Marcus's arm, she found a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, old, faded, showing 3 children playing in a treehouse. Someone had drawn a red X over the boy in the middle, Marcus. "Bag this as evidence," she told Jenkins, "and get me background on all 3 of these people. I want to know everything. Financial records, legal disputes, medical histories, social media, everything." As the forensics team worked, Morrison noticed something else. A ventilation grate near the ceiling had been removed and placed carefully on the floor. She climbed a ladder and peered into the duct. Inside, she found a small remote-controlled drone, the kind used for surveillance, with a reservoir attached that could dispense liquids. The pieces were assembling into a picture, but not the one she'd expected. By midday, Morrison had set up a command center in the estate's library. Files spread across the leather-topped desk painted a portrait of 3 lives that had diverged sharply from their idyllic childhood. Daniel Chen's record was spotless on the surface. Harvard Law, partnership at one of Singapore's most prestigious firms, pro bono work with refugees. But deeper digging revealed a gambling problem that had cost him nearly $2 million in the past 3 years. His most recent debt, owed to a shell company that traced back to Marcus Ashworth's pharmaceutical empire. Elena Vasquez had built her gallery from nothing, a true success story. Until Morrison found the lawsuits, 3 different artists claiming Elena had stolen their work and sold it under other names. The cases had been settled quietly, sealed by NDAs. All settlements paid by a mysterious benefactor, Marcus Ashworth. And Marcus himself? The golden boy had tarnish. His company was under investigation for price fixing on critical medications. Thousands had died because they couldn't afford the inflated costs. But the investigation had stalled, evidence mysteriously disappearing, witnesses recanting. Someone was protecting him. Morrison brought Elena in first that afternoon. The art dealer looked composed now, her hair pulled back, dressed in black as if already in mourning. "Tell me about the photograph," Morrison said, sliding the image across the desk. "The one with the red X over Marcus." Elena's mask cracked slightly. "That treehouse, that's where it happened." "Where what happened?" "Where Marcus destroyed us." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "We were 12 years old. Marcus's father had just bought him this expensive camera. Daniel borrowed it without asking, and I was helping him take pictures for a school project. We were in that treehouse. Marcus found us, and there was a struggle. The camera fell and broke. An accident. That's what we thought. But Marcus's father was furious. He blamed Daniel's family, said they were irresponsible, that the boy was a thief. Daniel's father lost his job. Did you know that? Marcus's father owned the company where Mr. Chen worked. One broken camera, and an entire family's life was ruined." Morrison leaned forward. "Is that why Daniel started gambling? Why he ended up in debt to Marcus?" Marcus never forgot. Even as adults, he held that childhood incident over Daniel's head. He'd offer to help, then trap Daniel deeper. Every favor came with strings attached. Every loan had impossible terms. Marcus liked having power over people. And you? What did he have over you? Elena's eyes glistened. The gallery. Those stolen artworks weren't my doing, they were Marcus's. He'd forge provenance documents, create false histories, then sell them through my gallery. When the truth came out, he paid off the artists and made me look like the thief. I was trapped. If I exposed him, I'd lose everything. If I stayed quiet, I was complicit. So you both had motive to kill him. We both had motive to want him dead, Elena corrected, but neither of us killed him. Daniel's interrogation was more volatile. He paced the library like a caged animal, his lawyer's composure shattered. Yes, I hated him, Daniel shouted. Is that what you want to hear? Marcus Ashworth was a parasite who fed on other people's misery. He destroyed my family, turned me into his puppet, and laughed about it over expensive scotch. Your phone records show you didn't make any call to Singapore that night, Morrison said calmly. Daniel stopped pacing. I lied. I left the room because I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. He was gloating about something, I don't remember what. I went outside to smoke. I don't usually smoke, but I needed something. When I came back, the door was locked. Locked from the inside, and you conveniently don't remember how you got back in. I don't remember because I was panicking. My best friend, even though I hated him, he was still my friend, was dying in there and I couldn't get to him. Morrison pulled out another piece of evidence, a bottle of rare Japanese whiskey found in Daniel's room, the same brand in Marcus's system. Analysis showed it contained a slow-acting toxin, not enough to kill quickly, but enough to disorient, to weaken. This was in your possession. The same poison that was used on Marcus. Daniel's face went pale. That bottle was a gift. From Marcus. He gave it to me yesterday, said it was a peace offering. A peace offering that you poisoned and gave back to him. No, I never opened it. It should still be sealed. Check the bottle. But when Morrison examined the evidence bag more carefully, she saw that Daniel was right. The seal was intact, which meant someone else had access to this specific whiskey and had poisoned a different bottle. The investigation was becoming a maze with no center. Victoria Harrington, the bride who would never walk down the aisle, arrived at the estate that evening with an entourage of lawyers. She was porcelain perfect, platinum hair, ice blue eyes, a diamond engagement ring that could choke a horse. She also had an alibi. She'd been at a spa resort 2 hours away, surrounded by witnesses. But Morrison's instincts said to dig deeper. How long had you known Marcus? Morrison asked. 18 months. We met at a charity gala in Manhattan. He swept me off my feet. Quite literally. I tripped on my gown, and he caught me. Victoria's smile was practiced, not reaching her eyes. And you had no idea about his business practices? The price-fixing investigation? Marcus and I didn't discuss his work. I'm a philanthropist, detective. I focus on helping people, not on corporate politics. Morrison slid another file across the desk. Victoria Harrington, born Violet Harper in Newark, New Jersey. Changed your name 15 years ago after your mother died from complications of diabetes. Complications she couldn't treat because she couldn't afford insulin. Insulin manufactured by Ashworth Pharmaceuticals at a 400% markup. The porcelain cracked. Victoria's face transformed, rage burning through the practiced serenity. He killed my mother, as surely as if he'd held a pillow over her face. And he had no idea who I was. I'd changed everything about myself, spent years crafting this new identity, all to get close to him. You were going to kill him. I was going to destroy him, Victoria hissed. Marry him, gain access to his company, expose every corrupt practice, every bribed official, every covered-up death. I was going to make him watch his empire crumble before I left him with nothing. But someone beat you to it. Victoria's composure returned, icy and terrible. Yes, someone robbed me of my revenge. Morrison's team had been working around the clock, and new evidence kept emerging. The forensics report on the pool table revealed microscopic traces of a polymer used in theater props, specifically stage blood. The blood on Marcus's shirt wasn't entirely real. Someone had supplemented the actual blood with theatrical blood to make the scene more dramatic. The cue stick, despite being found beside the body, had no traces of bone or tissue on it. The actual murder weapon was something else entirely. And the toxin in Marcus's system? It was from a rare plant native to Southeast Asia, where Daniel had been living. But it was also the active ingredient in an experimental medication being developed by Ashworth Pharmaceuticals, one that Elena had inadvertently learned about when examining falsified artworks that depicted ancient herbal remedies. Everyone had access, everyone had motive, and everyone was lying. Morrison reconstructed the timeline obsessively. At 2 a.m., Marcus and Daniel entered the billiard room. Security footage confirmed this. At 2:15 a.m., Elena's light was still on, she'd been watching. At 2:30 a.m., Daniel appeared on a different camera, outside the building, smoking. At 2:35 a.m., Elena left her room. At 2:40 a.m., Victoria's car pulled into the estate's driveway. She'd left the spa, her alibi a fabrication. At 2:47 a.m., Elena screamed. But there was a gap. Between 2:15 and 2:30, no cameras captured what happened inside that locked room. Morrison returned to the billiard room, studying every inch. The ventilation drone could have dispensed poison, but who controlled it? The theatrical blood suggested staging, but by whom? The locked door pointed to suicide or an inside job, but Marcus showed no suicidal tendencies, and only he and Daniel had been in the room officially. Then she found it, a hidden door behind a bookshelf. The kind of thing old estates always had, secret passages for servants to move unseen. The passage led to a wine cellar, then branched toward multiple rooms, including one that opened directly behind the bar in the billiard room. Someone had used this passage to enter the room without being seen on cameras. Someone who knew the estate's secrets. Morrison gathered all the suspects in the library as night fell again. "I'm going to tell you a story," she said, "about 3 children who grew up together, and how one of them destroyed the other 2, about a woman who lost her mother and spent 15 years plotting revenge, and about a murder that wasn't quite what it seemed." The 4 suspects, Elena, Daniel, Victoria, and Marcus's butler, James, who'd worked at the estate for 40 years, sat in silence, waiting. Marcus Ashworth was poisoned, yes. But the poison wasn't meant to kill him, just to weaken him, make him vulnerable. Someone wanted him conscious for what came next. They wanted him to know who was ending his life and why. "Elena," Morrison said, "you discovered the secret passages while exploring the estate. You're an artist. You noticed details others miss. You found the passage that led behind the bar, realized you could enter the billiard room unseen." Elena's face was unreadable. "Even if I did, how would I know Marcus and Daniel would be there that specific night?" "Because Daniel told you. You 2 coordinated this. Daniel suggested the bachelor party, made sure Marcus would be in that room at that time. You entered through the secret passage while Daniel left to establish his alibi. You confronted Marcus, told him everything he'd done to you both over the years." Daniel stood abruptly. "This is insane." "Sit down, Mr. Chen, because here's what I couldn't figure out. If you 2 planned this together, why did Elena scream? Why draw attention? Why create a locked room mystery that would only intensify the investigation?" Morrison turned to Victoria. "Because you were there too. You'd returned to the estate, used the same secret passage Elena had discovered. You wanted to confront Marcus before the wedding, tell him who you really were, watch his face when he realized he'd fallen in love with the daughter of a woman he'd essentially murdered." Victoria's hands trembled. "I did come back. I did use that passage. But when I entered the room, Marcus was already dead." "No," Morrison said quietly, "he wasn't. Because the 4th person in this room, James, you worked for Marcus's father, didn't you? 40 years of service. You were there when Marcus was a child, when he broke that camera and destroyed the Chen family." The elderly butler's face remained impassive. "I was. You knew about the secret passages because you'd used them your entire career. You knew Marcus's darkest secrets because you'd been enabling them for decades. But something changed. What was it, James? Why did you finally decide to stop protecting him?" James's voice, when he finally spoke, was steady. "Because of the children." He pulled out a worn photograph, different from the treehouse picture, but similar. It showed Marcus as a teenager with a young girl, perhaps 13. "My granddaughter," James said. "Olivia. She worked as an intern at Ashworth Pharmaceuticals 5 years ago. Marcus befriended her, then destroyed her when she threatened to report his illegal activities. She killed herself at 19 years old." The room fell silent. "I've spent 5 years planning this," James continued. "Watching him hurt more people, waiting for the right moment. When he announced his wedding, I knew the bachelor party would be perfect. I poisoned his whiskey earlier that evening using plant extract from the garden. Not enough to kill, just enough to weaken. I used the passages to enter the room after Daniel left. But you weren't alone, Morrison said. No. James looked at each of the others in turn. Victoria entered first. I heard her confronting him, heard him laughing at her, mocking her dead mother. Then Elena came through, having seen Victoria's car arrive. She'd been watching from her window all night, hadn't you, my dear? Elena nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. Elena added her own accusations, James continued. Marcus was cornered, weakened by poison, facing 3 people he'd wronged. He tried to run, but I struck him. Not with the cue stick that was staged later. I used a marble bookend from the shelf, hit him once, hard enough to crack his skull. And then you all covered it up together, Morrison said. No, Victoria's voice was sharp. I wanted to call the police immediately. I wanted the truth to come out, all of it. His crimes, his victims, everything. But James convinced us that if we all went down for murder, Marcus's lawyers would bury the evidence. His company would continue destroying lives. He said we needed to stage it as a locked room mystery, create enough confusion that the investigation would stall. So you worked together, Morrison said. Elena, you brought in the theatrical blood to make the scene more dramatic. Victoria, you left and then arrived with your lawyers. Daniel returned, pretended to be locked out. James arranged the body, placed the cue stick, wiped prints from the glasses. You created a puzzle with no solution or too many solutions. Except you solved it, Daniel said bitterly. No, Morrison corrected. You solved it for me. Every piece of evidence pointed in multiple directions. Every suspect had motive, means, and opportunity. It was too perfect, too orchestrated. That's when I realized this wasn't a murder mystery. It was a group confession. James stood, straightening his jacket with dignity. Then I suppose I should say it plainly. I killed Marcus Ashworth. The others tried to stop me, tried to save him even after everything he'd done. The poison, the blow to the head, the staging, that was all me. They're innocent. No, Elena jumped up. I helped. I knew what you were planning, James. I saw you enter the room and I didn't stop you. That makes me complicit. We all are, Victoria added. We all stood there and watched him die. None of us called for help. Morrison looked at each of them in turn. These 4 people bound by grief and guilt and the death of a monster. Here's what's going to happen, she said finally. James, you'll be charged with murder. The evidence against you is substantial. The rest of you will be charged as accessories after the fact. You helped stage the crime scene and obstructed justice. But, she continued, I'm going to make sure the full story comes out. Everything Marcus Ashworth did. Every life he destroyed. Every crime he committed. Victoria's testimony about the insulin pricing. Elena's evidence of the art fraud. Daniel's documentation of the financial manipulation. All of it will become part of the public record. Marcus Ashworth's empire will fall, just as all of you wanted. She gathered her files, preparing to leave. Justice isn't always simple. Sometimes it's messy and complicated and imperfect. Sometimes the good guys have blood on their hands too. 3 months later, Detective Sarah Morrison sat in her office reviewing the case file one final time before archiving it. James had been convicted of manslaughter rather than murder. The jury sympathetic to his motives, horrified by Marcus's documented crimes. Elena, Daniel, and Victoria had received suspended sentences and community service. Ashworth Pharmaceuticals had collapsed under the weight of investigations, its assets liquidated, its patents for life-saving drugs released to generic manufacturers. Insulin prices had dropped by 70%. Thousands of people who'd been unable to afford medication could now access treatment. Marcus Ashworth's death had saved more lives than his life ever had. Morrison was about to close the file when her phone rang, an unknown number. Detective Morrison? The voice was digitally distorted. I thought you should know you didn't solve the case. Not completely. Morrison's hand tightened on the phone. Who is this? Let's just say I'm someone who's been watching for a very long time. James didn't kill Marcus Ashworth. I did. That's impossible. The evidence was manufactured. By me. I knew about the passages, about the bachelor party, about everyone's motives. I poisoned Marcus with a much stronger dose than James realized. The blow to the head came after he was already dying. James thought he killed Marcus, so he confessed. But I struck the actual fatal blow while everyone was distracted. Morrison's mind raced through the evidence, the timeline, the possibilities. Victoria, you had the most to lose if the truth came out. You needed Marcus alive to marry him, to access his company from the inside. Wrong, detective. Daniel, you wanted him to suffer, not just die quickly. Still wrong. Elena, then, you're thinking too small. Did you never wonder how all these people ended up together at exactly the right moment? How everyone's darkest secrets were revealed at precisely the right time? How the investigation led you to exactly the evidence you needed to destroy Ashworth Pharmaceuticals? Morrison's blood ran cold. You orchestrated everything. The reunion, the wedding, the bachelor party. You brought them all together knowing one of them would snap. Now you're getting it. I've been planning this for 7 years, detective. Setting pieces on the board, waiting for the perfect moment. Marcus Ashworth needed to die, but more importantly, his company needed to fall. One death wouldn't accomplish that. I needed testimonies, evidence, witnesses. I needed all of these people in one place, with their motives aligned. But who? Marcus Ashworth killed my sister. Not directly. He never got his hands dirty. But she died because she couldn't afford the medication his company monopolized. Her name was Olivia James. Ring any bells? Morrison's hands shook. James's granddaughter. But she died 5 years ago. I was her twin, her identical twin. After she died, I took a job at Ashworth Pharmaceuticals under a false name. Worked there for 3 years, documenting every crime, every bribed official, every covered-up death. Then I started putting the pieces together. Anonymously sending Elena information about the art fraud, arranging for Daniel's gambling debts to be sold to Marcus's shell companies, introducing Victoria to Marcus at that charity gala. Yes, even that was me. Why are you telling me this? Because the statute of limitations on conspiracy runs out in 3 days, and you can't do anything about it. Because I wanted someone to know that Marcus Ashworth didn't die by chance, he died by design. And because sometimes, detective, the only way to get justice is to become the very thing you're fighting against. The line went dead. Morrison sat in silence, staring at the file. She thought about reopening the case, pursuing this new lead. But what would it accomplish? James had confessed, believed he was guilty. The others had found some measure of peace. Ashworth Pharmaceuticals was gone. Lives had been saved. She thought about justice and vengeance, about the thin line between them. She thought about a woman who'd spent 7 years orchestrating the perfect murder, not for personal gain, but to save thousands of people from the same fate her sister had suffered. Finally, she closed the file and locked it in the cabinet. Some mysteries, she decided, were better left unsolved. Some ghosts deserved to walk free.